Okay, welcome back. So today we're talking about, what are you anyway? Don't you guys love that? Don't you love that question for all the racially ambiguous people or people who are living life looking like something that they're really aren't? I don't know. Is there a better way to describe that?
No. If we can play it up here, I'll just give you...
Where are you from? Oh, I'm from, What do you mean exactly? Yeah, like, where are you from? Is he talking about where I was born or where I grew up? Or is he talking about where I live now? Or is he talking about my ethnicity, where my parents are from? Just answer everything. Well, I was born in Virginia, but my parents moved down to North Carolina when I was young. So I grew up in North Carolina and I still live here. So, but if you talk about ethnicity, my parents, they're from Central America. My dad's from Guatemala and my mom's from El Salvador. So, yeah. Oh, okay. No, I meant like what city? I still got it wrong.
Just highlights like an ongoing struggle of someone who's not white, essentially. Or you don't look like the people who populate the area that you live in traditionally.
Mm-hmm.
Like, for example, in North America, Canada, US, I think from speaking to people who are not some sort of English heritage or European heritage.
I would say or Mexican.
Yeah.
Because it's like, people just say, oh, you're Mexican,
yeah.
Whatever, you know?
Like they just, if you're not that, then they just, the question is a loaded question. Like, you don't know, are people literally just asking what city you're from, or are they trying to divulge into like what race you are, which is like not really anybody's business at the end of the day. But, yeah. So how do you answer that question?
I answer that question with a question, because I'm usually like, do you mean, like, so I don't bog myself down with, oh, should I answer this way? Should I answer that way? Should I tell them where I was from? Because for me, it is one of those, like, it's exactly like the clip. It's like, well, I was born here, but then I grew up here, but then I'm from wherever, and my parents are this, but I'm Canadian. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, so I usually say, like, do you mean where my parents are from, or do you mean, like, so I just automatically ask what they mean, because ain't nobody got time for that. And then usually they'll say, oh, like, your background. And I'm like, oh, well, I'm Canadian, but my parents are this and that.
Whatever, yeah.
And then they're like, oh. And I feel like when people, they don't think I'm Spanish at all. They just think, yeah, she's Canadian, you know? Yeah. So it's always, and then it's always more questions. Or it usually, you know why they ask that usually? It's because there'll be something. And then it'll be like, oh, you speak Spanish? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh, why do you speak Spanish? Where'd you learn it? They always assume so where'd you learn it? And I'm like, at home? But I also have an English accent when I speak Spanish, so that's why, right? And then they're like, oh, okay. And I'm like, yeah, my parents didn't force us to speak Spanish at home. Like, I just know how to speak Spanish. And they're like, oh, okay. And then that's when they're like, oh, where are you from? That's usually how it comes up. Not always. Mm-hmm. And then when it comes up not from me speaking Spanish, then that's when I ask, like, what do you mean?
Yeah.
Where are you from? Meanwhile, they're like visibly.
Yeah. Where are you from anyway?
Yeah.
Yeah.
What about you?
Depends on my mood. So sometimes I'll be like, oh, what do you mean? Like, to clarify, just to like get straight to the point.
Simone doesn't have time to be wasting on
And
nobody.
then other times, if I'm feeling particularly gamey, I'll just say my city. I'll just say the city I grew up in and wait for the questions to roll in.
Or if they do or don't. You might actually just get them to stop. They'll be like, oh, exactly. I don't want to ask that now.
Exactly. So it's either you say that response, like the city you're from, and then the questions stop because they're like, they don't want to, either they really just wanted to know what city you grew up in, or you've shut down the conversation so they can't roll into anything else. And if they do, it looks bad on them. I think that's what happens there. Like they just stop because they don't want to pry, and they don't want to like press the issue because you've just said city and they
Mm-hmm.
were probably thinking, what country? Like,
Yeah.
where is your skin color from? Mostly, like that's
Where's
what they're-
your skin
Yeah, like where's your skin
Why
color
do you
from?
have these Asian eyes?
Why do your eyes look like that?
Why are your eyes Asian
Why-
inspired?
You don't. And then so and that comes from like history of like in the like being younger and like going through the like whole life heritage history of like where I'm from and like why I look the way I do and just getting fed up and being like it's nobody's business. Like I don't care to explain. I don't need to explain. If I want to tell you, I'll tell you. And that's that.
But you know what I also find very interesting is why that question still even comes up in a sense. Like, I guess, yes, it makes sense if we're talking about something related to that. But a lot of times it just comes kind of out of the blue and it's just kind
People
of...
are just nosy. Like,
yeah.
like what is it really? At the end of the day, it really shouldn't matter.
But even if...
You know what I mean? Like, is it a question that you're asking so you're asking to see how you're going to treat me?
Yeah, I guess.
Is that what it is? Like you're going to formulate your interactions with me based on where I say I'm from? Mm-hmm. You know? And that's why I tend to just like not even start.
Mm-hmm. But I feel like I don't understand, like what I was trying to say was I don't see why it's like people are even surprised, I would say almost. Mm-hmm. It's like if you knew anything about any type of history, pretty much almost any part of the world has been... there has either been slaves of sorts. Yeah. There has
some
been,
sort of
there's
migration.
Been some kind of like migration, human like trafficking. You know, like it's not even a surprise. Like, how are you surprised? You know,
right.
Even when I say like, oh, I'm like my mom's Colombian, and then you know they look at my sister and it's like I look visibly white and my sister looks visibly black, right? Mm-hmm. But my sister, when you look at her, she is like spitting image of my mom, like a clone, 100%. And then I'm a clone of my dad, like 100%. Yeah. And when you look at it, in real life, my grandfather from my mom's side was actually like, I don't know what you'd call him, African Colombian, from
African descent, like, but from Colombia.
And it's because there was like they brought slaves over to Colombia as well when the Spanish were like doing their thing down there, right? And on top of it, there's the mix of like the indigenous people as well. Like there was a lot of indigenous influence down in the South America as well, not just in Colombia, right? So how are you even surprised when I say that? Like, if I say my mom's Colombian, then you should be like, oh, okay, yeah, it all makes sense why you and your sister look like that, you know?
Yeah, yeah.
And like, even saying my dad's from Spain, like, you know what I mean? Like, it's just, it's still surprising how close-minded we are, even though the history is right there in front of us. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And then I feel like this conversation never ends in a place where the person who's on the receiving end of the conversation
gets anything from it. No.
Because, okay, so you say you play the game and you go through all these questions and you tell them your whole family history. And then you get to a point where they're like, oh, okay. And then like they move on and they have all this information about you. And you're like, why the hell did I tell them all this? It really doesn't matter. Or two, you know, you say all these things and then like, I've had it happen to me like many times in my life where I say where I'm from and people will be like, oh, but you don't look Jamaican or you don't look like, you know, whatever. Or you tell them and they're like, really? Are you sure? Mm-hmm. What do you mean, are you sure? Like, how would I not know? Like, I'm not adopted.
Meanwhile, your dad was born in Jamaica, wasn't he?
Yeah.
And he has like a full-on Jamaican accent and everything. Like, he is Jamaican, just of different descent, Asian descent, right? Asian,
yeah, exactly, Chinese. So it's like when I like for me answering those questions, it's not. I'm not getting anything out of it. There's no win for me in this exchange. Mm-hmm. So it's like I just would rather not.
Well, I get that too. Like, and how I was saying, like my grandfather is of African descent. Like, people always end up looking at me like, oh, you're just a white girl trying to claim, like African.
There's
heritage.
No win. There's
and
no
it's
win.
like I'm really not trying to claim it, but that's truly what it is. And it's not like I went to 23andMe to figure that out.
Right.
Like, it's my mother's father.
Right.
And my mother, like, she has stories about it, you know, because they're still very racist in Colombia, even though, like, most of their population is Black. So I just don't even understand why.
Yeah, there's a lot of that.
Depending on the areas, actually,
Yeah.
that's why. Like, you know, on the coast, it's all like, there's so many Black people, and they have, like, everyone has curly hair, and it's like, you know, and it's like I say it, and then it's like I'm trying to claim this heritage that's not actually mine, and it's like, well, it is, just because I didn't get the melanin in my skin to
that doesn't
prove
mean that
it
it's
to
not
you.
there.
It's
And
still part of my heritage.
right, and it's like, why do we need to prove anything at this point? You know what I mean? Like it's so sad to me that at this point in time, in all the hundreds of years of our human existence, we're still, you know, obsessed with people's like race and where they come from. Like, knock it off. You know what I mean?
Well, I guess it's because I don't experience, like, again, it always comes down to racism. I don't experience racism the same way as other people.
Yeah.
And that's why, and because I'm from, like, the visible, like, white group, the visibly white group, then it seems like, well, it doesn't matter. And it's like, well, I still appreciate my heritage. I still, like, I don't want to be racist to everyone. Like, you know what I mean? Like,
You
it's
shouldn't
so,
be racist
so
to everyone.
like,
Yeah.
it's so stupid. Anyway, the question should be abolished.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah. Stop asking
just let people live.
Yeah. Exactly.
And if you're going to judge people for their answer, like, then don't freaking ask either.
Exactly.
Right?
It's a waste of a conversation.
Like, it's one thing if you're just trying to learn more and you're like, wow, that's really cool.
Yeah.
Or like, wow, I didn't know. Or is there, you know, yeah, sure, you're going to keep going. Is there a big Chinese, what's it called? Population in Jamaica?
Yeah, like curious
oh, I didn't know
questions are
that.
fine,
Like,
yeah.
wow, you know, cool. But to be like, oh, it's like, get out of here.
Exactly.
Get out of here.
Or when people try and like imply that you might be something else. Like, are you sure you're not Filipino? How would I know? Like,
You know what? You're right.
You're right. Let me just go follow up with this.
My dad's Jamaican accent was actually Filipino this whole time.
What it was. Like, yeah, it's like if somebody tells you what their ancestry is, just take it and walk away. Like, you got your information. Like, don't try and like, you know, rationalize or like if it doesn't make sense to you. Like,
but no one,
just
you know, it's
accept
funny
it.
that they would say that to you, but then no one would sit there and be like, "Are you sure you're not white?" Like,
Yeah.
no one's ever said that to me.
No, because of course not. Like, you look like a white girl. Like that's the thing. Like, it just shows like the contrast, right? Like,
It's so crazy.
people are ridiculous at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Like, seriously. So yeah, long story short, let's stop asking that question
Yeah.
and let us know, how do you answer that? Do you get asked that question?
Does it make you uncomfortable? And I'm sure in different parts of the world, there's like, I'm sure in different parts of the world, it's a thing. Like,
Well, this is the
if
thing,
you're
right?
American, I'm curious to know what's the question that you're asked. Are you just, do you know what I mean? Because here, a lot of people migrated here, and like in Canada, a lot of people migrated here. So there are still just a lot of first generation Canadians where everyone's parents came from Jamaica, came from wherever.
Country, yeah.
But in the States, it's been, 300, 400 years worth of African-American descent.
Yeah.
Where you guys really are just American at this point.
And they're still being asked.
Yeah, like, are you being asked? Like,
Yeah.
so where'd you come from?
Yeah.
Meanwhile, like, you guys have owned this piece of land for like
I think you know
hundreds
where we
of
came
years.
from.
Yeah. Let me know. I'm
Yeah.
curious. I want to hear your story. Write it down there.
Yeah. All right.
See you next time.
Thanks for watching.